want to show you a little interview I did with Keir Starmer, your leader, just a few minutes ago. And look, the Prime Minister's big idea is the determination to turn the UK into a high-skilled, high-wage economy. So I started by asking Keir Starmer, surely he would love that to happen. He can't object to that.
Yes, I agree with a high-wage, high-productivity economy. That's what we've been arguing for the last 10 years. What the Prime Minister has to answer is the question of why, after 10 years, we've still got a low-wage, low-productivity
Well, he says it's all
economy.
about immigration and the, the influx of unskilled people.
It's the lack of an industrial strategy. It's a failure of government over 10 years.
Is your belief that actually immigration hasn't played a role?
Well, look, the Prime Minister is playing this game where he's pretending that he's sort of just landed from the moon and he's looking around and saying, things look pretty awful around here, we need a bit of levelling up, things are so awful. And he and the Tories have been in government for 11 years. So we're in this state because of the way that they have governed the country. They've got a lot to answer for here. Of course we want a high-wage, high-skilled, high-productivity economy, but we need a plan for that. And a plan for that isn't fuel shortages, gaps on our supermarket shelves and pretending that this is some cunning plan to drive up wages and drive up skills.
I mean, look, the immigration question does matter to people. You didn't address my question about whether or not the influx of low-skilled workers has played a role in driving down wages for Indigenous workers.
Well, in some sectors there's some evidence of that, but across the board that isn't the case. But the Prime Minister is trying to switch the conversation from the real reasons there have been low wages, low investment, low productivity, and that's the lack of a long-term strategy for the regions, for the country. Talk to any business, and they will say, if the government supports us, we will have a long-term strategy.
Now, as you pointed out, we're in the midst of what people call a supply chain crisis, not enough lorry drivers to drive fuel to petrol forecourts, not enough lorry drivers for, lots of other really vital, deliveries, food to supermarkets and the rest of it. Lord Wolseley, Tory Brexit-supporting chairman of Next, says the answer is actually more immigration or more people coming in on visas to fill those roles. Do you agree with Lord Wolseley?
The first thing is, the answer is to plan. This is not an unexpected event. The pandemic, the coronavirus, was truly something unexpected that was, a global pandemic. This problem was predictable and predicted, so we knew when we were leaving the EU that we would need to have a plan for lorry drivers. We didn't put one in place. Now, your plan could be, we'll have a 12-month training programme that will deal with the skills for driving and the conditions at work. You could say a working visa programme. We've got to the stage now with no plan.
They couldn't have done that during COVID, though. They couldn't have done a 12-month training programme during COVID. We were all in lockdown.
Well, of course they could, and they're not even saying now that that's the reason they didn't do any training. There's a complete lack of a plan. We're now in the situation where, realistically, we're going to have visas issued for lorry drivers.
When you've said 100,000, are you sticking to that number?
I've said we need as many as necessary.
You did say 100,000.
Certainly, 100,000 is the number of vacancies for lorry drivers. The point I was making there was the government said 5,000, and there is a massive mismatch between what the government is saying and what's needed. And we had the Prime Minister making a speech today full of jokes in which he did not address this question at all. And people who are queuing for their petrol or looking in the supermarkets for the food that they need will wonder why on earth the Prime Minister didn't address what is their central concern, which is, a lack of fuel, gaps in the supermarkets, prices going up, and at the same time we've got universal credit being cut £1,000 a year for the 6 million families that are struggling to make ends meet. And the gap between the Prime Minister's rhetoric and jokes and the reality for millions of families is just getting wider and wider.
Now, you've mentioned universal credit. Obviously, one of your central charges against the government is that they should not be taking £1,000 away a year away from poorer families. But the question then arises, Rishi Sunak's very clear that it would be wrong to borrow to fund that £6 billion a year that's required. How would Labour pay for that $6 billion?
Well, what we would say is you shouldn't make this cut. This is a very significant taking away of £1,000 a year from 6 million families who are struggling to make ends meet. Many of them are working families, so they're in work, working very, very hard. So
I think there's wide agreement that this will have, a significant impact on people's lives. But there is a related question, which is how do you finance it if you're going to keep it?
Well, we wouldn't keep it. We would replace universal credit with a better system because one of the...
But it's still going to cost £6 billion, though, whatever system it is, it's going to be expensive.
Yeah. We will replace it with a better system, not least because at the moment it's very difficult with a tapering system for people who want to work more hours and earn more money. They have to work very many hours to make up the money. But just going back to the central question, how can the Prime Minister claim that he wants to level up the United Kingdom when he's cutting £1,000 from the 6 million families that most need it?
But people will have noticed, I put to you this question, should benefit payments be funded by borrowing, yes or no? Well,
we set out, no is the answer to the question. We set out fiscal rules, as you know, at our conference last week. We will balance the books when it comes to day-to-day spending. We will borrow to invest. So very clear about that, Robert. It will have to be paid for as day-to-day spending.
From tax? Obviously.
Well, from day-to-day spending, from tax or other sources, but day-to-day, not borrowing.
What would the other sources be if they're not tax?
Well, there are other sources of income and different ways to tax, which we're looking at, but it's day-to-day spending. But the question the Prime Minister has to answer is, how on earth can it be right when prices are going up, bills are going up, at the same time to take away £1,000 from 6 million families struggling to make ends meet?
Now, the other, I'm afraid, completely conspicuous thing about Boris Johnson, whether you like it or not, is he plays the game of politician as celebrity better than pretty much anybody. You don't play that, you don't even try to play that game. How do you cut through?
Well, look, he's a showman. And he gave a speech today with lots of jokes in it. He didn't address...
But people like that.
Well, he didn't address the fuel crisis. He didn't address the gaps on our supermarket shelves. He didn't address universal credit that's being taken away for so many families. He didn't even address the climate crisis that's upon us. So, is he a showman? Yes, he is a showman.
How do you get a hearing?
At the moment, we have huge issues facing us, whether that's... how we actually make Brexit work rather than just saying get Brexit done, whether that's our place in the world generally, whether it's the climate crisis, and I think we need serious political answers to those questions, not just slogans that when you look behind the slogan, there's nothing there. Look behind the slogan levelling up. What's there? There's absolutely nothing. Did you hear anything in that speech today that told you how we're actually going to level up the United Kingdom? I didn't.
But on the related point... it looks to me as though we are in for months, possibly longer than that, in terms of squeezed living standards.
Yes.
You would normally expect an opposition party to be ahead in the polls in those circumstances. You are not. At what point will you judge that something has fundamentally gone wrong for you?
Well, we used last week at our party conference to make some very important changes to the rules of our party, to close the door once and for all on anti-Semitism and to make sure our party faces the country. I then set out in my speech what the future could look like with the Labour government, whether that's in terms of education, work, health and security. Now, it's us. We've now got the opportunity to make that case and we will use the coming months and years to make that case. The cost of living crisis, I think, is going to unfold as we go through the winter months. It's going to hit millions of families very, very hard. And I think, the showman, the jokes are all very well, but they're going to wear thin when people are hit in their wallet, and they're going to be hit very, very hard in their wallet.
Now, there's one other issue which I need to address with you, which is the failure of all parts of the justice system to properly bring men guilty of violence against women, sexual abuse, to justice. Now, many people now accept that one part of the problem is a particular culture within the police. Cressida Dick, who you have stood by, has been in the police force all her life. Why is she the appropriate person to push through the necessary cultural change?
Well, she does need to push through those changes and to push
But
them
why are
through
you
very,
standing
very
by her?
quickly. But, Robert, this question of violence against women and girls is something we have been discussing for 10 years or more.
Sure.
I was advocating when I was Director of Public Prosecutions the changes we need to make. I've drafted a victims law.
But she has been part of a culture that failed to address it. So why is she the right person to continue in job?
Hear me out. I have prosecuted, with my team, thousands of rape cases. I know what the problems are, and we prosecuted many of them successfully when I was Director of Public Prosecutions. We need structural change.
But it's a very simple question. Is she the right person for that job now? Yes or no?
Yes, she needs to carry through the reforms that need to be done very, very quickly. But, Robert, we're doing what we always do with violence against women and girls. We're trying to reduce it to one person.
No, I'm not trying to do that at all. I mean, there's obviously a systemic issue, and the point is you've got to think about who is the right person to change the system. And some people think she's not the right person.
There's a systemic problem that's been there for 10 years and we've been walking round and round and round it. I was looking at it when I was Director of Public Prosecution. I drafted a victims law. We've said to the government we'll vote with them if they bring forward provisions. They haven't done so. And, you know, now is the time for the government to step up when it comes to violence against women and girls.
Keir Starmer, very good to see you.
That's it.